To talk more about the economic impact of extreme weather, I'm joined by Anthony Chan. He's the former Chief Economist at JPMorgan Chase. Thanks so much for joining us again. We just had reports from California, Hungary. I told you about China. All these weather events we could add, of course, all those countries in Europe above 40 Celsius. Just what is happening right now, and what, from your point of view, is the immediate economic impact that all the countries and the planet are dealing with?
Well, certainly the immediate economic impact is going to be lower levels of productivity, lower levels of economic growth, and at the same time, it's also going to increase mortality rates because there are going to be more deaths associated with these extreme weather conditions. And when I say extreme, I mean extreme on the cold side and, of course, on the warmer side. And these extremes are certainly not consistent with faster economic growth. In fact, to the contrary, they tend to slow economic growth.
Yes, the mortality issue is a big deal, and it also puts pressure on things like healthcare services. I was going to ask you which sectors of the economy are hardest hit by this intense heat, but I presume healthcare services are one of them. I was speaking to my sister yesterday, who's an NHS doctor in London, and she was saying summer is the new winter, where you're getting a lot of people coming in that shouldn't really be there because of the extreme weather.
That's correct. It certainly puts a much bigger burden on the healthcare system as many of these ailments come in from heat strokes and people just dying, unfortunately, because of the extreme weather conditions. But you also see it in the farm sector. The farm sector, when you have these extreme weather conditions, especially on the heat, the yields come down. So in a period where food prices are already accelerating, this can be a bigger issue.
I mean, does it boost tourism in the same way, or do people think, you know, it's just too hot to go to the beach?
Well, if the temperatures are super extreme and they're super hot, last week I was in Europe doing some economic presentations, and certainly what I saw there was the tourists perhaps, they were there, but not as excited to do what they normally do when weather conditions are normal. So it does change the behavior of the tourists, and those activities that are outside or in the sun, certainly less of that activity takes place.
Yeah, going back to your point about farmers and crops, we've seen, for example, I watched the crop yields from, summer wheat, winter wheat, all that sort of stuff, as you do when you're covering the global food crisis right now. How does this sort of change in weather trickle down, not just from farming yields, but to consumers? I presume it's less stuff hitting the shelves at less quality, but higher prices.
Yes, the quality of the produce is, of course, not as good, but more importantly, there is a lower yield. So it's not unusual to see wheat yields or corn yields going down anywhere from 5 to 10% with these extreme weather conditions. And right now, when you see that food prices are already rising in excess of 10% on a year-over-year basis, when you look at the consumer price index, this tends to put even further upward pressure in a world where we have a shortage. And unfortunately, many of the emerging markets that are already struggling with higher energy prices because of current conditions now have to deal with higher food prices and scarcity of food, which is causing some countries to hoard their production and not export, which again causes not only higher prices, but also increased hunger for many of these countries.
Yeah, India is a very good example. I'm glad you raised that. Parts of Europe, too, have been experiencing record high temperatures, as we said. I remember growing up in England in the 1980s, and we didn't need air conditioning. It was usually raining. But now there's a huge demand for air conditioners, even in Scotland, can you believe it? How's the heat wave affecting that sort of energy planning for the future? Because obviously that's going to be more demand, just as we're dealing with a climate emergency.
That's a great point, Nathan. And what we're seeing is that in a world we're not producing enough fossil fuels, if the demand is increasing, that causes a major problem. So we certainly have to move towards planning, but in a world where supply is shrinking while demand is increasing, it sort of exacerbates this economic imbalance.
Anthony Chan, thanks so much for joining us. You're always great to have on the show. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.